like to tell people who are early in their careers that luck is always a part of it, but you have to make your own luck. VC startup land is probably the most challenging thing that you can choose to do with your life. But, great rewards if you pull it off too. Really, the best founder mindset in gaming is going to be somebody who understands that they got to be fast, scrappy, agile, get something to market as quickly as they can. It's not going to be the best thing that they've ever made. It's going to be the thing that's going to teach them the most important lessons they need to build to game 2 and game 3.
Welcome back to VC Unfiltered. I'm Lucas Poles, managing partner of Pegasus Angel Accelerator. Super excited to have you here. Today on the show, we've got Dan from 1AM Gaming joining us. He's going to talk about all things gaming, content, publishers, a little bit of infrastructure. He's going to walk us through a couple of his hot takes, as well as some of the things he looks for in an investment. So, Dan, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So, 1AM Gaming, you're in one of the most interesting spaces to me. I'm an avid gamer. I would love to invest more into the space. And so I'm super excited to find out more about what you guys are investing in, what you're kind of looking at, and all of that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, so 1AM is a seed stage gaming-focused venture capital fund. We focus on content. So, a lot of, if you look at VCs in the gaming space, a lot of them do diversify quite a bit into, call it business to business or tech platforms. We tend to be very content focused, which is, a little unusual, but that's sort of what our niche is. And so we're looking for studio founders, have put together their leadership team, have a vision for what they want to do and a plan, and they are out pitching, to investors, and we hope to lead the round for seed rounds. Our typical round for us at seed would be $3 million to $6 million investment, and of which we typically will lead with at least half of that. Yeah, and that's the nutshell version.
No, that's great. So you talk about content. So walk me through that a little bit more. So, what does that actually encompass?
It's really just games. I mean, we do have some portfolio companies that are not directly games. They might be gaming adjacent. One of our portcos is a digital comic book distribution platform. So that one's a little, some of them are kind of outside of our typical portfolio investments, but for the most part, it's, when we say content, it's games and game makers, or, even some content creation type people.
Okay, so not really like the infrastructure piece of it, very much more an actual game. And so walk me through that kind of like that life cycle of an actual video game. If it's going from kind of the indie realm where they're first kind of starting, or like what does that actually look like as you kind of progress to a large game that we've all heard about?
I guess if you look at the landscape of games that are out there, from indie to AAA. It could be, game team could be as small as 1 or 2 people. We generally would not invest in somebody that didn't have a co-founder. For the most part, it's important that the founders have a partner that complements their skill set and that they can, lead the team together. But so I think at the smallest scale, you could have a 2-person team that just happened to be extremely talented in different areas, different disciplines, up to, a AAA size team. For Call of Duty, for us, we were my teams were 400 people at the studio, but that was only a part of the game development pipeline. You'd have outsourcing teams that were all over the globe. You would have other studios that you're partnered with for development. It could be 1,000, 1,500 people at any given time. Overall. So that's kind of, I guess, the scale of what you would look at. Where we tend to focus for our founder search is on a small, agile team of people who can wear a lot of hats. It's tough when you've been making games for a long time and you've kind of gone through your career progression and you're in a leadership role. If you're on a large team, you're probably not getting your hands dirty as much as you used to, and you might be a little rusty with the tools, and it's like that makes it a lot harder to move into an independent game funded by a VC, because you just don't have the luxury of just having leadership positions. Most of the people on that team are going to have to be building stuff. And that's just because, just the economy of at that level of game development is, it's just a much smaller team size. We would probably, our average team size is probably going to be anywhere from 10 to 20 people at that seed stage.
How do games actually get out into the market? You were Call of Duty, right? That's a whole different kind of ball game. But from the seed to from the seed stages that you're looking at, like what are those actual next steps for them after they're kind of funded? It's like we're building the game, but it's I feel like half of the battle around games is getting the word out. So like, what are they actually doing out there to make that kind of breakthrough?
It is tough. That's probably one of the hardest parts about being an independent game. If you don't have a publishing partner, for example, and you're trying to do it all yourself, it's a very, very challenging road. I think, in most cases, gaming startups are going to look for a publishing partner. There's strategic reasons for it. There's, they have expertise. Generally, publishers have expertise in, especially marketing and PR. And, so the ideal scenario is you find a publishing deal, and if they don't do any game financing, then you will probably get they'll probably take a smaller rev share. If you go into a partnership with a publisher and they do game financing, then they're going to be taking a larger rev share. But that is effectively how publishers get paid: is they take a cut of the profits from the game. They don't generally have a stake in the company. That's where I think VCs and publishers serve a different role. If you're trying to do it by yourself, there's a lot of people who do it. It's just very, very hard. It's like, you have to be out there constantly talking about your game, going everywhere you can, trying to maximize awareness and exposure. I mean, just getting awareness is probably the hardest thing. Just getting your name out there and getting people to know about you is the hardest part about it. It comes from videos. It comes from attending festivals, attending trade shows, trying to get featured at one of the many industry events that happens around the year, and getting media coverage. Although traditional media doesn't go as far as it used to in the game, in modern times. So it's a lot of community building. I think most founders, the more open they are with their community as they're building the game, the more they interact with their kind of core audience and they build out from there, then the more success they can have organically. But it's still, even with that, it just takes a lot.
So is that one of the main things that the companies at this stage are kind of looking towards, that they're getting that kind of beta out and they're building out that kind of community to make sure that they're going in the right direction to then continue to expand? Is that kind of the initial focus before you get to the publisher, or how important is the actual community to them?
There's many different ways to do it, but I think that you look at a typical smaller VC-backed startup, and oftentimes they will release into early access months or even a year or more out from the full game launch. And that is to start building that audience and potentially even earning revenue prior to the game's full launch to help get them across the finish line. Our model, like kind of, think about sort of the ideal candidates are going to be able to come in, operate in a fairly agile fashion and try to get real market reaction data within 12 to 18 months. And it's a pretty, that's a pretty tall ask. Even on Call of Duty, we were 3 to 4 years development timelines, and that's across 1,000 to 1,500 in any given moment. So you can imagine trying to do that with a 15-person team in 12 to 18 months. It is the gauntlet. Like, it is, being in gaming VC startup land is probably the most challenging thing that you can choose to do with your life. But great rewards if you pull it off too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Right now, what you're describing, I was just thinking about Power World, right? Like, they launched insane success, right? They launched what, like half or a third of the actual game out in beta to get everyone galvanized and very excited about it and pull in revenue. Is that kind of the metrics that the startups are looking at for those additional rounds? Like when they're looking to go raise a Series A, is that like what does that actually look like for them? Does it need to be kind of out in market? I'm trying to quantify like in my head what those like stepping stones are. Cause like if I'm looking at B2B SaaS, right, it's like, oh, you need a million or a couple million in ARR to be able to go and raise that successful Series A. So what does that kind of look like from a gaming perspective? Like what are those metrics that they're looking at for those later additional rounds?
Well, gaming VC is still pretty young in its development, so I would say that we haven't, as an industry, quite figured it out yet, the right way to do it. But generally speaking, if you're going to go after Series A, you at least have, I would call it your game at, let's say, alpha state, where a very large percentage of the experience is more or less complete and fully playable, and you have metrics that show that it's the success trajectory is there and the thesis was right and there's validation of that, and you just need to scale and kind of take it across the finish line, bring it to launch. That we don't, there's just not a lot of Series A in gaming VC right now. There was a lot of huge investment activity in the, let's call it 2019 to 2021 timeframe. And I think that many of the people who have invested at that larger scale that was happening in that time are still kind of trying to wait and see what happens. Some of those investments have already kind of gone by the wayside. I just not seen a lot of Series A activity in gaming.
Interesting.
Sometimes on the platforms and tech side you do more actively than on the game content side.
I do want to dive a little bit into your background because it's quite fascinating. You were at a AAA studio for ages, right? So walk me through that. Walk me through how it was. Any of the key insights that you would love to offer some of maybe the people that you might end up funding here in the next year or two.
The way that the industry operates now is very different from how it did then. I joined in 2003 when after I moved to LA in '99 and had worked in TV. Worked at a TV network for 4 years and realized that it just was not the path I was on for my life. And fortunately, my wife, who was at that time my girlfriend, had convinced me that it was time to saddle up and like get on the right path and figure out like what are you actually going to do with your life. So it was, I knew gaming from an early age. I've always loved gaming. It wasn't until I think my either senior year in high school or early college when it kind of dawned on me that you can actually make games and do it as a career. It was, I think was it Myst or Ribbon, one of those games that came out of Sierra that had an extra bonus disc, and I remember seeing it, and it was sort of like behind the scenes of the making of the game, and that was what kind of made me have that aha moment. I could actually do this as a career. When I first moved to LA, I didn't know anybody, didn't have any kind of network at all. And when I finally committed to that path, I basically just kind of hit the pavement for 6 months. And anybody who would listen to me or not still would bug them. And just, it's just it's sort of how I've operated at various points in my life when I'm trying to jump into something new and uncomfortable, is I just force myself to get out there. It's not easy. I'm naturally, I would say, fairly introverted to a certain degree. I don't, it's not easy for me to go out and just talk to people randomly.
Yeah.
But I also, I force myself into those difficult situations. And I think that, I was very fortunate. I got lucky to meet the right people that eventually brought me in to interview, and that was the job at Treyarch. And, I think from my first contact to actually walking in the door for my first day on the job was about 6 months. And that was during a time when I was just, I was talking to anybody and everybody in the game industry. I like to tell people who are early in their careers that luck is always a part of it. Like there's no getting around the fact that you have to have good fortune for things to come together and get you in the right place that you want to be, but you have to make your own luck. It's not something that just randomly happens. You have to put yourself out there into every opportunity you possibly can until something clicks. And it's kind of, you talk about, the startup kind of pitch process, expect you're going to get 90% rejection rate or 95% rejection rate. It's a similar, idea. You just have to have some really serious persistence and absolute confidence that that's the right thing to do.
It's absolutely true. And especially now for the founders, when I look at it, they're like, well, it's taking longer to do my raise than normal. I was like, well, yeah, this is one of the worst times to ever raise, ever in the time of venture capital. And so it's like, yeah.
It is the worst time. There's a part of it, I have brought people in my network who are raising, and it wasn't quite ready, and it just wasn't the right time, and they are now basically bootstrapping and just trying to build whatever they can with a couple of founders, maybe 3 people who have taken the leap and left their jobs and are sure that this is the right thing to do, and they understand that this is the worst time possible to be raising money. And so if they can basically hold out long enough and start to build things with a very, very, very small team, bootstrapped, then going into next year at some point, it's going to open up again. We saw, there was just that 0.5 point rate reduction that I think is going to hopefully start pushing capital back into the investor market. And, I think there's still some injuries and people are still burned from kind of the free money period. And so I think it will be a slower start because people are just going to be generally a lot more cautious. And gaming VC is fairly young, like I mentioned. So it's going to take a little time for it to right size and, for this industry to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think that we're kind of at that point though. To your point, the 0.5 point drop in this space is a big deal, and especially with the rest of the year continuing that kind of trajectory is going to help drastically. And I genuinely think it's going to open it back up a lot next year. And to me, a lot of the founders now that are raising those are the ones that are going to be the best. Like we look back at 08 and 09, and it's like, well, Airbnb and Uber started both during that insane time. And once you're if you're forged in like the brimstone of a volcano, like you're going to be,
yeah, that's right. The startups that make it through the other side of this period are going to be, rock solid. They're going to have survived the battle and come out stronger on the other side.
100%. And honestly, I like the approach of the founders that you were even just talking about, the ones that are just bootstrapping and just trying to maybe do a little bit of hybrid entrepreneurship and get kind of some stuff done to get some of those early points. I think those are my favorite founders, like just out the gate, because they're like, well, we can't get it done this way, and that's okay. We're still going to get it done. So tell me about one of the more recent investments that you've made, or because I know you've done angel investing, maybe one that went south and maybe why it went south, maybe as a learning experience.
I've only been angel investing since about 2022. And I was just going back and looking. I have 6 angel investment portfolio companies. None of them have gotten to the point where it's like that make or break moment yet. I know, my first investment has definitely had a couple of near misses, but their game came out today, actually. Their first title came out today. So I'm eagerly looking for the metrics on that, see how it's doing. And when I was first starting to think about VC and angel investing and like what to do to help the next generation of game makers be successful, they kind of cold called me, and you get a lot of that if you are out there on LinkedIn and you have those kind of tags in your profile. You get a lot of cold calls, but sometimes I do like a very initial pass of vetting and just making sure that they're the real deal. And I met them, and I liked their work ethic. They were keeping their burn rate very low. They were based in New Mexico strategically because they get like a 25 to 30% discount back from the state of New Mexico, and they just kept themselves lean. And and I appreciated that about them, and it was kind of my first check to write, and so jumped in, and then today is the day that their first game came out.
Hey, that's super exciting. And
Yeah.
honestly, even with the typical first investment, normally it crashes and burns within 3 to 6 months. So you should feel very happy.
They did. They had their near death moment. I tried to help as much as I could, but at some point you have to find the right partner. They did fortunately find a publisher that was also a startup publisher, and I've since gotten to know the founder of that pretty well. And I'm very thankful that he picked up their game out of however many games they were looking at the time.
I've seen more because I just looked at one that was trying to disrupt the publishing space, and I find that as a very interesting, from an infrastructure standpoint for gaming, is a very interesting space, because don't publishers take like 40 or 50%?
Oh yeah, at least, yeah. And it's usually laddered up, based on how much the budget is, and then how much revenue it's generating, and there's usually a ladder that will decrease their stake over time as you hit those milestones. But the publishing models are all over the place. I personally think that publishing needs to be disrupted. That's part of my whole thesis in this space right now, and I believe that there is a role that they play. I use the analogy of a sailboat. They are like the large sail, let's say maybe a spinnaker sail, which is like the thing that is just going to collect as much air as possible. They're growing the tent, right? They're growing the audience in gaming. That's their job. That is really the role that they play in this ecosystem. They're not going to be innovating. They're not going to be taking risks. They're not going to be necessarily carrying the rest of the work that's going behind building that win for them. And so I also think that the more you see these mergers, the more you see consolidation at the top, and the less competition there is immediately behind them, then the worse it's going to be for everybody. They're going to be best when they feel fear, when they feel that there's somebody constantly on their heels, and that's where I think the disruption needs to happen, is in that space. Independent, AA games, independent games that punch way outside their weight class. That's where I think this space is ripe for disruption, and that's kind of that's where my objective is over the next couple of years. I am always looking for partners that are aligned with that thesis and aligned with that mission, and that's kind of what we're going after.
Nice. No, that's super exciting, because that's if they're not scared, they're not going to move. Why change if you don't need to? If you're only going to happen, who cares?
Well, complacency is going to be if the big publishers get too complacent, then it's going to be bad for everybody.
No, 100%. Our final segment, my favorite segment, is around the hot take, and so. And you kind of just touched on one a little bit with the publishers, but what would be kind of your favorite hot take about either the gaming space or just a hot take in general about investing?
I think that, kind of similar to the point about the publishers needing disruption, I think VCs also are broken. Like VC in gaming is broken right now. And it's unfortunate that such a, nascent movement of venture capital investment in gaming had to happen when it was the best possible conditions, and so like the wrong lessons were being learned from people. And I think that, you see anywhere from $50 to $100 million deals going in for first-time founders, or teams that have just exited let's say a big name studio or publisher, and unless that team has been a part of the 0 to 1 process in a different startup, they don't really have the right tool set necessarily to do it. And they may be extremely talented. They may be, exceptionally talented. They may have a lot of experience. They may have great brains, on the team. But they may not have the tool set to understand how do you actually scrimp and save and cut costs down to the bone and do everything that you can yourself and find the cheapest, best quality output in Eastern Europe or South America or whatever you can, right, to get it done. So I think that is where the next era of VC is going to emerge, not in those massive $50 to $150 million deals, but in the smaller, scrappier startups that can scale pretty quickly once they get traction. And like I said, 12 to 18 months is kind of our window that we ideally would like to see a seed company get to market of some sort, whether it's early access or full launch. But learn lessons. Another thing I tell people, here's another hot take that's I think really, really valuable for your listeners is don't pitch your magnum opus as your first startup idea. I see so many I've been dreaming of this, making this game for years. This is the game to end all games. And that's just not where you need to be. You need to be starting in, I got to build something small and fast, make mistakes quickly, learn from it, and then move to my next venture. Get the next game out. It's game 2 and 3. Pal World, I think, was game 3 for that studio.
Yeah.
You look at Baldur's Gate, they had Divinity Original Sin before that. That was, I think, their game 3 or game 4. Your dream game is not your first game as a startup founder.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake I feel like everybody makes. Unfortunately, there was just a lot of capital flowing at the time to support that kind of mindset. But I think really the best founder mindset in gaming is going to be somebody who understands that they got to be fast, scrappy, agile, get something to market as quickly as they can, and it's not going to be the best thing that they've ever made. It's going to be the thing that's going to teach them the most important lessons they need to build to game 2 and game 3.
I mean, that's a really good point. I thought I was going to end it there, but I actually have another question just in my head. I've been thinking about this.
Go for it.
So I was thinking about open world, right? And I don't know if you remember, so Goosebumps used to have a choose your own ending. And I'm wondering if you've seen anyone approach you with this, to actually start making it, because I would love to play it. The idea of an open world that has AI integrated into it, and so that you're choosing truly the directions that you're going, and that you're having a unique game experience in some type of actual open world without that is totally separate to what someone else is doing. I don't know if anyone has approached you with something like that, and or how they're actually thinking about integrating AI into the games that are being developed from a storyline perspective.
I mean, AI is the hot topic in any investing space right now, games included. I think that a lot of the energy around AI has been on Gen AI, really focusing on building better tools that can get people there from A to B faster, which is great. I mean, I think it's a necessary part. It's not part of our thesis necessarily as a VC firm. What I'm actually more interested in seeing from founders is how are they using AI to improve quality of life for their players. I think that's probably the next wave of AI innovation that's going to come after you've got some of the tool sets that are out there helping people build faster and cheaper. I've talked about ideas for what that means with other people. I think there is, the text-to-speech capability or speech-to-text capability in games could be very interesting when you start to think about control mechanics and input mechanics, and how can you utilize speech to text in a way that actually makes the gamer's life fuller and more interesting and deeper, have a deeper connection to that game experience. I have seen, we just took a pitch meeting a couple weeks ago where they are using characters with kind of AI generated dialogue trees, and I think that is that's a fun one. Definitely, if you can have it to where it creates a lot of variety, but then you also, the worry is always going to be when is this AI going to hallucinate and start having a really weird, crazy conversation with you? It's you think about the bugs that people like to post on YouTube for games right now. Just imagine what's going to come in the future. It'll be pretty entertaining, but yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely people out there thinking about it. You should find a co-founder and come pitch your game idea.
I'm not playing. I'm not going to build it.
Right. Yep.
Oh God, awesome. Well, Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
All
right.